Hello, welcome to today's Back to the City. Today I am joined by Tony the Scribe. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Simon.
And we're going to be diving straight into the third EP in your artistic hat trick, which is Mixed Blood from 2016, a boom bap record, Mixed Messages, an R&B record from 2018, and now Mixed Feelings, which is electronic chamber folk rap.
I swear to God, I made that up out of absolutely nowhere. But like, I feel like it's about as close as you can get to talking about what it is.
It's descriptive.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we've had interviews about both of those previous two. So we're also performing a hat trick. And I love, so let's begin with focusing on the one obvious point of continuity is the first word in the title of each EP. So could we begin, before we dive in any of the details and talk about some distinguishing features of this one, could you reflect a bit on the series of EPs and how this one fits within the series?
Yeah. I think one of the things about EPs in general that I've always loved is I have a short attention span, right? And some of the works of music that have meant the most to me over the years have been in that short format, right? 15 minutes, 20 minutes of music, and that's it, right?
Do you have any examples of?
Dessa's False Hopes is the one that really made me fall in love with the format.
Yeah.
But Haley Hendricks' Fish Eyes EP is another one. Serpent with Feet's first EP, which has 4 ethers on it. I can't remember if it's called 4 ethers. But there are a number of them where that format, for some reason, just really speaks to me. I think, you know, partially it's because I'm a young millennial and distractible and all of those things, and partially it's because I've usually had such an active lifestyle that I'm going around and doing stuff all the time, right? That like sitting down for an hour, you know, to listen through a whole record, right, is hard, right? And it's hard to keep my attention for that long, right? And I also find in that format, there ends up being a lot of filler for me a lot of the time.
Yeah.
You know, I'll find, 4 or 5 songs that I really love on the album, and then a bunch that I am ambivalent about. And so sometimes I'll make my own edits, right? I'll take an album and chop it down to, what I feel like the narrative through line of the album is, right? And then take out all the other songs so that I can listen to just what I feel like is the core of the story.
Absolutely.
One example of a record like that is Guante and Big Cat's An Unwelcome Guest. It's a record I absolutely adore. And also, and I've talked to Kyle about this, I think it's too long. I think there are a couple songs on there that, especially because it's a concept record and it has a really strong narrative through line, but there's also a lot of songs that are sort of tangents off of that, which I feel like works really well to create a mood, and a lot of those songs are really brilliant, but sometimes I just want the narrative.
It's about to be its anniversary.
Is it?
It is, yeah. When I was interviewing Kyle, one of my other guests this month, in fact, that came up in the interview. So maybe there's time for there to be the special Tony Edit anniversary edition.
Yeah.
And actually, we're talking about, as you're reflecting on attention span just there, I think that came up as a theme in our discussion of Mixed Messages.
Yeah.
I think that the songs themselves intentionally explore that state of affairs.
Yeah, it's a thing I can't stop thinking about ever. Funnily enough, given we're talking about attention spans.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And I mean, that's another reason for, I think in my before the mix series, before, in my adolescent explorations of rap and the Kill Streak record that I put out in 2013, I think I was also much more focused on trying to do one thing, and just trying to make good rap music, right? And I think what I realized in 2015, 2016 was that, especially as a producer, but also as a songwriter, there were a lot of things I wanted to do that that didn't fit neatly within the box of what I had done so far, right?
Yeah.
I mean, coming up, you know, as a listener to Rhyme Sayers, to Doomtree, you know, to Lupe, to Kanye, right? Like, I had a very Midwestern sense of what I wanted my music to be, and that meant a specific thing in terms of production, in terms of DIY aesthetic, like in terms of all these other things. And what I realized at that point was I was like, okay, wait, I want to learn how to make an R&B record. I want to learn how to make like a weird, you know, kind of a Radiohead throw everything at the wall record, right? I wanted to learn how to make a maximalist record. I wanted to learn how to make like a folk record, right? And so these are all sort of things that I've been exploring over time, right? Is working out these different things and then saying, okay, so I in general, like with this record, I knew going in that I wanted the production to be more complex and more dense than anything I'd made before, and also that I wanted to produce it all, right? And that I wanted to play with more different formats of songs, right? Rather than
even within just 4 songs, there's a lot of experimentation.
Yeah.
And breadth. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
even within each song, actually.
yeah, and so that's like kind of where I was going in with it, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, you don't say, you know, I'm gonna write an R&B record about digital disconnection, like Mixed Messages was, right? And then sit down and you write 4 R&B songs and it's over, right? It's a space that I lived in for a while, but I feel like each of these EPs has taught me a different thing about how to be a better writer, and how to be a better producer and how to be a better musician.
Yeah.
And that's really the goal with all of it, right? Is experimentation towards growth.
Yeah, absolutely. You referred to maximalism.
Yeah.
And in the closing track of this new EP, Dishes, we certainly encounter that. Maximalist orchestration is referred to, again, quite descriptively in the bio, contrasting with the minimalist harps and synth of Weak. So could you reflect a little bit on the kind of oscillation that we have within the record between minimalism and maximalism on the back of what you were just saying about pushing yourself to grow as an artist, to grow as a person?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been attracted to minimalism in general in music. I think there's something to, I can't remember who said it might have been Quincy Jones, but they were like, look, if it's a good song, you should be able to play one note on the piano to accompany it, and the song should still ring out. And so there's always been something for me about simplicity, especially as a rapper, right? So much of what we do is just like, look, you got a break, you got your words, and you've got to tear the house down, right? And so, you know, I think I really had that feeling of like, no, I want to just do this, you know, as simply and as brilliantly as I can, right? And I think that's one of the things that Mixed Blood really is it's like a very, very, very minimalist record in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think as I was exploring working on Mixed Messages and other songs, like one of the things I realized is like, okay, I actually as a songwriter and as a producer don't know how to go as big as I would like to go. This is funny to say, but like one of my biggest musical influences, especially when I was younger, is Linkin Park. And
I wasn't expecting that.
People never do, right? And I mean, there are things I still love about those records. There are things I don't love about those records anymore. But one of the things I think they nail, and Nirvana's another good example of this, is really, really dynamic, quiet, loud arrangement, right? Like the difference between a space that is really focused towards the interior and more experimental in terms of sound. You know, you're bringing in different soundscapes, you're doing stuff like that, and these like massive, rousing choruses, right? And that's always something that I've really loved, and so that was one of my sort of guideposts as I was working on this record, is how can I make something that feels that dynamic, that it can really go to different places
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's sonic quality that we have in Linkin Park, Nirvana, the Pixies,
Yeah.
the loud, quiet. Let's bring that into conversation with my favorite part of the bio that you shared,
Yeah.
is the focus on tension between internal knowledge and worldly projection.
Yeah.
And that relates in turn to Tony the Scribe being above all a warrior monk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's my favorite piece. I can see the truth in that, and the combination of this tension, just quoted, relating in turn to the quiet, loud oscillation, and discipline. Life and work built on discipline and strict intentionality. So yeah, let's just spend a bit of time unpacking some of that. The idea of being the warrior monk, this tension between the inner and the outer, relating perhaps to the sonic quality that we were just discussing, and that tension coexisting with discipline and intentionality.
I moved back to Minneapolis in 2015 after college, right? And I started being a racial justice organizer pretty much full time.
Yeah.
And did that really through the fall of 2021 in various ways and shapes. And now I'm retired as an organizer. I for a bunch of reasons, have decided to sort of say goodbye to that part of my life and move on to different things. But one of the things that I think I learned during that period was, when I came in, I was really strident and unapologetic and so outwardly focused, right? So focused on material changes in the world around me, right? And in materially fixing the world around me. And I extended and overextended, right? And then got burnt out, got broken, got hurt. I would come sort of back to myself and retreat to some interiority. But then as soon as I felt good enough to be out on the battlefield again, I'd go back out, right? And I think one of the things I was trying to learn during that whole period was how to actually stop and retreat inside, right? And focus on my spiritual practice, focus on my mental health, focus on what I want to see flourish in myself, right? Rather than, what I want the world to look like in an ideal circumstance.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things that finally got me there was my practice of martial arts. So I started practicing European sword fighting in 2015, and then I took up Kung Fu in 2017, I believe.
Interesting that paralleled the work as well. 2015, the same year. You turned to both of those things in the same year.
Yeah. I think it was medicine that I really needed, and didn't quite know what I needed, and I think and didn't quite know that I needed.
Yeah.
I think that martial arts and organizing in some ways are very similar, in that when you look at them from outside, you see them as these exciting, chaotic, violent things, but they actually require a lot of groundedness and a lot of relaxation in order to do them sustainably and successfully.
Absolutely.
And in particular, I practice Neijie Chuan, which are Chinese internal martial arts. So Tai Chi is the most well-known of them, but Bagua Zhang, Xingyi Chuan, Wudang Chuan are other types that I practice as well. And they come, they're sort of built around a Taoist cosmology, right? This idea of yin and yang being at the center of everything. And I think the more that I did these arts, the more that I started to internalize the body lessons of these arts, right? Which is that you need tension and relaxation. You need strength and you need speed. You need commitment, but you also need relaxation. You need peace, right? I think that yin-yang tension has really become a central feature of how I think about my life and how I think about my work.
Yeah.
So that I feel like is a lesson that I'm finally finally embracing fully in my life now. And I feel like making this record was a big part of getting there.
Yeah, absolutely, which adds a whole other level to the kind of quiet loud as we encounter it in, say, Memory Card and Dishes.
Yeah.
There is, when we look at the trajectory from more kind of minimalist and tender at the beginning, and then in both of those songs we have louder, more intense, more virtuosic kind of delivery of like the bars, and then back to the tender. When we look at that, not just through the lens of, oh, well, that's kind of effective, quiet, loud, but also through the lens of the yin-yang, relaxation, tension, there's a whole other level to it.
Stories aren't linear from an emotional perspective, right? I mean, you know, you look at the Monomyth, for example, Joseph Campbell, right? And you have the rise and you have the sink into the underworld, right? And then you have, you know, coming back up. I think a good song is one that, I mean, I disagree with a lot of people on this, but I think a good song is one that takes you on a journey.
Yeah.
Rather than just keeping you in like a fun spot. You know, there are a lot of really great pop songs that
have a vibe.
Yeah, that have a vibe, they stick to the vibe, you know, and that's the end of it, right? You know, like something like Goosebumps, right, by Travis Scott and Kendrick Lamar. Great song, fantastic song. Like, that song doesn't necessarily go anywhere,
Lots
you
of
know?
songs that one might enjoy, like, at a dance night. Like I'm listening to lots of Dua Lipa at the moment. Like, the Dua Lipa songs don't, you know, they have a vibe.
Yeah, and I think the songs that really stick with me are the ones that take you on a whole journey.
Yes, absolutely.
Wrapped up in, you know, a very short period of time. Like, I'm thinking for some reason of And So It Goes by Billy Joel. You know, it really takes you on a journey to a place where he finds peace with the fact that he's going to lose this relationship that means so much to him. And yeah, that I think that sense of a journey finding resolution matters. And I think with both Dishes and Memory Card, the situations that I was dealing with that I'm talking about in those songs were deeply frustrating and deeply painful, and, you know, had anger associated with them, right?
Yeah.
And so I think being able to let that out, right? You know, and not let it out in a shallow way. I think, like, men use anger so often as a deflection of vulnerability.
Yes.
And for a while I thought that the way to get through that was not to be angry at all, right? To shut down my anger entirely and to pretend that it wasn't there, and to look down on it when it showed up.
Or to assume that it's always a cloak for, like, the deeper emotions.
Exactly, and I mean, I think in those songs especially, like, what I realized was, like, no, anger actually is the deeper rooted emotion here. And not just anger, right? Anger in a cocktail of sadness and hope and resentment and all of these other things, right? But I think that, you know, talking about grief, which is, I think, what both of those songs are about in some ways, without talking about resentment. I mean, we talk about anger as the first stage of grief, right? I think there's a lot to be explored there.
Yeah, there's an awareness with anger, I think, of violation, like boundary violation, and anger, I feel, is a judgment, and a warranted, a valid judgment that something is not right.
Yeah.
That there's an absence of respect in some way. So, for example, in the intense segment of Dishes, I keep washing, though it's not going to change. There's this, there's a kind of sense, at least momentary hopelessness there. Whereas in other aspects of the record, there is an awareness and a celebration of change. I mean, the record opens with "used to,"
Yeah.
And then we'll go back. We'll turn to that momentarily. What used to be the case. So there's an awareness of change, and metaphorically, hard-won experience that if we just keep on trying to wash these dishes, then even internally, then change comes about. But there's going to be moments when it feels like it won't.
Yeah.
And just to dismiss those moments as wrong
Yeah.
is probably not going to facilitate change. And to like grudgingly accept those moments as part of the story, so that change can happen, is also not going to work. To let those moments, to welcome those the moments of hopelessness and disbelief in change seems key.
Yeah, and I think that that song means so much to me.
Yeah.
I think it's a complicated alchemy of despair and hope. 'Cause like I think, one of the things when I was younger, I wanted every song to end, hopefully. Right?
You felt like a kind of ethical commitment to some extent to the audience, to the listener.
To find some sort of resolution and catharsis. And Dishes is kind of bleak in a lot of ways, it ends with "I keep washing."
Yeah.
Right? Which to me is not, a feeling that the dishes are going to go away.
No.
But does feel like a resolution of sorts.
Definitely. I think we're back to a shift from the focus of wanting something to change externally,
Yep.
And that being the objective. There is some kind of resolve with Dishes, but you just encapsulated it perfectly. There isn't the sense that the context within which I have to keep the Sisyphean, like I need to keep on washing these dishes, that appears to be perpetual. But so is the commitment back to discipline and intentionality, despite having just expressed it seems pointless. We're questioning, was this all a fucking waste of my soul?
Yeah.
Was just moments before I keep washing. And so to be able to ask that question and acknowledge the possibility, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe, yes. And I keep washing.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really what, like, the time between when I came back to Minneapolis and the pandemic started felt like to me, right? Was trying to find, and most of this record was written before the pandemic, which is wild because listening to it now, it feels even truer than it did when I wrote it.
Yeah.
Like it's like I wrote these songs because I felt like I was trapped in this cycle, and I was trying to sort of start fumbling my way out of it. And now I look back on them and I'm like, okay, now I am out of it. And it's wild to look back on these songs and just recognize like how deeply I was feeling trapped, in cycles.
I think in Mixed Messages in particular, there's a yearning for connection and an awareness of pervasive disconnection.
Yeah.
And here, there are signs of and celebration of a cultivated connection with self, like integration of these different aspects, a confident shifting between genres, shifting between different forms of self-expression, and it doesn't seem, there's nothing arbitrary about it. There's the journey. There's lots of references to hands throughout the whole EP.
I'm obsessed with hands.
Yeah.
They are so dynamic, right? They can be so soft. They're, one of the parts of our body that has the most sensation. They're a place for a lot of connection. Holding hands, touching somebody. And they can also be so rough and calloused, and they're also our biggest tools for action in the world, right? debatably. And man, I sound like a stoner right now. Hands, man. But
in a good way.
yeah, they're complicated. Hands are complicated, and they're you're right. They do show up a lot. I didn't even really think about that.
It comes through so the final two tracks are Weak and Dishes, and Weak begins focusing on the arms, strong arms, and rough hands. Skin so sallow, bones so tough. And then there's quite the contrast with early on in Dishes, soap suds on my wrists, and then by the end of Dishes, just as we're about to transition back into the tender, right at the height of the intensity, hands keep shriveling up. How about the rest of me? So the hands are kind of like microcosm. That's so different, isn't it? What's happening with the hands in Dishes as we're committed to washing, and our hands are shriveling up, and we've got soap suds on our wrists. Contrast that with hands so rough, skin so sallow, bones so tough. And in Weak, in the first verse, as we're embarking on the journey, the Act 1 kind of predicament is I don't feel the things I touch. You say that the hands are very sensitive. Here, the hands have been being used so much.
Yeah.
And not for washing dishes.
Yep.
That the somatic experience there that the hands can allow is not something that we're kind of attuned to. So can you reflect on how the hands are showing up in those two different songs?
Yeah, I mean, it's, in Chinese element theory, we say, or energy theory, we say that an excess of yin will surely lead to yang, an excess of yang will surely lead to yin. Mm-hmm. And yin is like the negative, receptive, diplomatic, emptiness manifestation of energy, right? And yang is the full, powerful, aggressive, active, light representation of energy, right?
Yeah.
Again, and some of this, it always feels a little funny to talk about these with all these heady concepts, because they are things that I think about, but they're not, I'm not sitting at my computer being like, how do I write a metaphor about hands that helps me to explore the duology inherent in Chinese, that's not how it works. I write the song.
Yes.
But the songs naturally have pieces of what I'm thinking about and what I'm exploring, and sort of how I'm building my life at the moment, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So doing so much martial arts and kung fu and talking so much about Chinese energy theory, it can't help but come through, right?
Totally, yes.
So at the beginning of Week, we're talking about the hands as an excess of yang, very much, right? Mm-hmm. They've become so beat up and bruised, and they've been so activated that they can't feel anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And in Dishes, we're almost talking about them as an excess of yin, right? So they're so soaked, right, and so pruny, right, that that they're soft and malleable and can't be used as hard, right? You think
absolutely.
about, and for the problem is that when your hands are pruny, it's way more easy to cut them up, or those kinds of things, because your skin isn't as tight and protective, right? Mm-hmm. The journey of Week is in part some ways it starts out so young, and then it goes to the chorus, which is about wanting to find weakness, right? Yeah. Wanting to find safety in that, right?
Wanting to be told that rest is all I need. That's a particularly interesting moment.
Yeah, and then the bridge of that song is really about recognizing that there isn't space for me to be weak at the moment, right? But saplings still need room to grow. The weeds, they always come to choke. I'll be there to clear the grove and burn the briar till it glows. There's work that still needs to be done, and so, there are moments where no matter how much you want to rest or be weak or retreat, you have to fight, or you feel like you have to fight.
Take a deep breath, take one last look at your face, and I turn the game off. I put the cartridge back in the case in case I ever want to see what